Tonight, we are going to walk together through some very old and very gentle teachings. They come from the tradition of the Buddha, who sat beneath a tree a long, long time ago and discovered something so simple that it has taken the world thousands of years to begin to understand it. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from. The Buddha discovered that you are already whole, not broken, not in need of fixing, not a problem to be solved. And yet, within that wholeness, there is a beautiful mystery. We are vast and we are small. We are everything and we are nothing. We are the wave and we are the ocean. And somehow, both of these are true at the same time. We will explore this mystery together tonight, through stories and reflections, through ancient wisdom and quiet wonder. There is no rush. There is nowhere else you need to be. The only thing asked of you is what you are already doing. So settle in, take a slow, deep breath, and let's begin our journey together. There is an old saying in the Buddhist tradition, "You have been walking a long road. Rest now. You are closer than you think." And perhaps that is how you feel tonight, as though you have been walking a long road, carrying something, searching for something. Maybe you are not even sure what it is you are looking for, only that the looking itself has been going on for a very long time. A quiet hum beneath the noise of your days. If that is true, then you are in good company. Because the question you carry, whether you have shaped it into words or not, is one of the oldest questions a human being can ask. Who am I? Not the quick answer. Not your name, not your job, not the things you have done or failed to do. But the deeper question, the one that rises up in still moments, late at night, or in the pause between one breath and the next. Who am I, really? Tonight, let us explore a story about someone who carried that very question across a great distance, looking for an answer. Once, a long time ago, in a land where monks lived in quiet monasteries tucked into the folds of green mountains, there was a young monk who could not find peace. He was a good monk by all accounts. He rose early. He sat in meditation when the bell rang. He swept the courtyard, tended the garden, and chanted the sutras with the others. From the outside, his life looked orderly and calm. But inside, a question burned. He had come to the monastery years ago carrying a simple hope that by living this life, by following the path, he would come to understand what he truly was. And yet, for all the years of practice, for all the sitting and walking and silence, the question remained unanswered. He asked the senior monks. He asked the abbot. Their answers were kind, thoughtful, filled with scripture. But none of them quite touched the center of what he needed to know. What is a monk? He would ask. What are we really? And they would say things like, a monk is one who follows the precepts, or a monk is one who seeks the way. And these answers were true, but they were not alive enough. They did not breathe. So one morning, before the sun had risen, the young monk packed a small bag and set out walking. He had heard stories, as monks sometimes do, of a place far away, a place spoken of in whispers, a monastery unlike any other, where those who had grown weary of easy answers sometimes found their way. The journey was long. He walked through valleys where mist hung low over the rice fields, and up through mountain passes where the air grew thin and the only sound was the wind. He slept beneath trees. He ate what was offered to him in the villages he passed through. And with each step, the question he carried seemed to grow both heavier and lighter at the same time. Heavier because it mattered so much. Lighter because the walking itself was a kind of answer. After many days, he arrived. The monastery was not what he expected. It was smaller than he had imagined. Tucked into a hillside, half hidden by old trees, it looked as though it had grown there rather than been built. Moss covered the lower stones. The gate was open. He stepped inside and was met by an old monk with kind eyes and a face so deeply lined it looked like a map of somewhere he had never been. "Welcome," the old monk said simply. "You have come a long way." "I have," the young monk said. And then, because he had carried it so far and for so long, the question came out before he could even think to be polite. "Please, I must know. What is a monk?" The old monk looked at him for a long moment, not with judgment, not with amusement, but with the kind of attention you give to something you take very seriously. And then he asked the strangest thing. "Do you mean in the daytime or at night?" The young monk did not know what to make of this. "In the daytime or at night?" He repeated. "I do not understand." The old monk smiled and gestured for him to sit. They sat together on a stone bench beneath a plum tree whose branches were bare. It was late autumn. The air was cool and still. "A monk," the old monk began, "like every living being, is a creature of two movements. Expansion and contraction. Opening and closing. Like the breath. Like the tides. Like the petals of a flower that open to the sun and fold again at dusk." He paused, letting the young monk take this in. "During the day," he continued, "a monk is in the contracted state. Behind these walls, dressed in robes, doing the small and ordinary things. Sweeping, sitting, eating rice. From the outside, it all looks rather contained, rather small. This is the body you are used to seeing. This is the body most people assume is the real one. And at night?" the young monk asked. The old monk's eyes seemed to change. They grew softer and wider, as though he were looking at something very far away and very close at the same time. "At night," he said, "a monk expands. The walls cannot contain what a monk truly is. At night, the monk moves through the whole world, touches the stars, is as vast as the sky itself." The young monk sat quietly with this. Part of him wanted to dismiss it. Poetry, he thought. Beautiful words, but just words. The old monk seemed to sense this. "You are thinking that the daytime monk is the real one," he said gently. "The one with the broom and the robe and the aching knees. And that what I describe at night is just a nice idea." The young monk nodded, a little embarrassed. "That," said the old monk, "is the difference between your monastery and ours. You start from the contracted state and assume it is real. We start from the other end. We start from the vast, expanded nature. That is what we consider most real. And the small, contracted, daytime body?" He paused. "We call that the body of fear." The body of fear. Let those words settle for a moment. Not as a judgment, but as a gentle recognition. Because most of us, if we are honest, live much of our lives in some form of contraction. We hold ourselves in. We tighten around our worries, our plans, our sense of who we must be. There is a kind of clenching that happens so gradually, so constantly, that we forget we are doing it. The shoulders that creep up toward the ears, the jaw that holds itself just a little too firmly, the way the chest sometimes feels as though it has drawn a circle around itself and said, "This far, no further." This is not a flaw. It is not a failure. It is simply what happens when a living being moves through a world that feels uncertain. We contract to protect ourselves. We make ourselves smaller because smaller feels safer. We pull in our wings without even realizing we have wings. And it happens so quietly. We do not announce it to ourselves. There is no moment where we say, "Now I will become small." It simply accumulates like dust on a windowsill, so gradually that we stop noticing. The guardedness becomes normal. The holding becomes habit. And after a while, we forget that there was ever anything else. We forget the feeling of being open, of being wide, of being as unguarded as we were on the very first morning of our lives. But the teaching from that old monastery on the hillside offers us something remarkable. It suggests that this contracted state, the one we spend most of our waking hours inside, is not the whole of what we are. It is real, yes, but it is not the deepest truth. The deepest truth, the old monk said, is the expanded state, the one where the walls cannot contain us, the one where we touch the stars. The Buddha himself spoke of this in a beautiful way. He taught that within every being there is a nature that is vast, luminous, and free. He called it our original nature, not something we need to create or earn, but something we need only to remember, to uncover, like the moon on a cloudy night. The clouds move across it and we think the moon has disappeared. But it was there all along, full and bright and whole, simply waiting for the clouds to pass. You are whole. That is not something you need to achieve. It is something you already are. Now, here is where the teaching meets the body, where the ancient story meets the breath moving in your chest right now. Because expansion and contraction are not just ideas. They are the most intimate rhythm of your life. You have been doing it since the moment you were born. In fact, you are doing it right now. Notice, if you like, the breath. You do not need to change it. You do not need to make it deeper or slower or more spiritual. Just notice it as it is. The body opens and the breath flows in. There is a moment of fullness, a gentle swelling like a sail catching wind. And then the body softens, releases, and the breath flows out. There is a moment of emptiness, of quiet return, and then it begins again. Opening, closing, expanding, contracting, over and over, without effort, without instruction, like the tide answering the pull of the moon. If you listen closely, you might notice something remarkable about this rhythm. It does not need your help. You did not have to plan this breath. You did not set a reminder. The body simply knew. The lungs opened because that is what lungs do. The air came in because that is what air does. There is a kind of ancient intelligence in this rhythm, older than any thought, older than any worry. It has been keeping you alive since the very beginning, asking nothing in return. This rhythm is not only in the breath, it is in everything. The mind expands and contracts. Sometimes your thoughts are wide and spacious, open like a clear sky. You feel generous, curious, at ease. And sometimes the mind draws in tight, caught on a worry or a memory, spinning in a small circle. Both of these are natural. Both are part of the rhythm. The heart, too, opens and closes. Sometimes it feels enormous, capable of holding the whole world. A moment of tenderness so wide you could weep with it. Looking at someone you love. Hearing a piece of music that seems to know you. Watching the last light of the day soften everything it touches. In those moments, the heart is vast. And sometimes it feels small and guarded, pulled in behind its walls, not quite ready to be touched. A sharp word, a memory that still stings, a fear that has no name. In those moments, the heart draws its curtains and waits. And this, too, is the rhythm. Neither state is a mistake. Both belong. The Buddha once compared the mind to the sky. Clouds pass through it. Storms arise. Sometimes it is dark for a long while. But the sky itself is never damaged by what passes through it. It remains vast, open, and clear. The clouds do not diminish it. They simply move. And so it is with you. The contractions do not diminish what you are. They are simply weather, passing through. There is something deeply reassuring about this understanding. Because if contraction is not a failure, not a sign that something is wrong with us, but simply one half of a natural rhythm, then we can stop fighting it. We can stop believing that we are supposed to be expanded all the time, joyful all the time, open all the time. That is not how life works. That is not how anything in nature works. The flower does not bloom in winter and feel ashamed. It rests. It contracts. It waits. And when the time comes, it opens again. What the monks in that old mountain monastery understood is that the practice of awareness is not about forcing ourselves into the expanded state and staying there. It is about bringing a gentle, patient attention to the whole rhythm, the opening and the closing, the day and the night, the breath in and the breath out. In the Zen tradition, there is a phrase for this kind of attention. They call it beginner's mind. The great teacher who coined this phrase once said, "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. It is the willingness to meet each moment as though it were the first, to not assume we know what the breath will feel like this time, to not assume we know who we are today based on who we were yesterday. When we bring this kind of fresh, gentle attention to the rhythm of our own expansion and contraction, something very quiet begins to happen. We start to notice that the contraction is not as solid as it seemed, that even in the tightest, most frightened moments, there is space. There is breath. There is awareness watching the contraction, and that awareness itself is not contracted. This is a profound discovery, and it does not require force or effort. It requires only the willingness to be here, to listen, to notice. The old monk at the mountain monastery measured a monk not by how perfectly they performed during the day, not by how still they sat, or how neatly they swept the path, or how correctly they chanted the sutras. He measured a monk by how many beings they touched at night, and by how many stars. What a beautiful way to measure a life. Not by what we accomplish in our contracted daytime hours, but by how fully we allow ourselves to expand. How deeply we let ourselves touch and be touched. How willing we are to discover that we are not small, even when the world asks us to be. The Buddha taught that clinging is the root of suffering, and one of the things we cling to most tightly is our idea of who we are. Our fixed image, our contracted identity. I am this kind of person. I always react this way. I am limited in these particular ways. We hold these beliefs so tightly that we mistake them for truth. But the teaching of that mountain monastery and the teaching of the Buddha himself gently suggests that these fixed ideas are just the daytime body, the body of fear. They are real in a sense, but they are not the whole of what we are. There is a saying, sometimes shared among practitioners: the wave does not need to go looking for the ocean. The wave is already the ocean. You are not separate from the vastness. You are made of it. Every contraction is held within an expansion that is larger than you can imagine. Every small, frightened moment is cradled by something immense and patient and kind. Tonight, as you lie here, you do not need to try to expand. You do not need to reach for the stars. Simply let yourself be breathed. Let the rhythm carry you as it has carried you every moment of your life. And know that even in the smallest, quietest contraction, you are whole. You have always been whole. The young monk sat for a long time beneath that plum tree after the old monk finished speaking. The evening was coming on, and the first stars were beginning to appear above the monastery walls. Somewhere below, in the valley, a night bird called out once and then fell silent. He did not have an answer to his question, not the kind he could write down or carry home in his bag. But he had something better. He had the beginning of a feeling, a sense, just barely forming, like the first warmth of spring in soil that has been cold for months, that what he had been looking for was not far away at all, that it had been here the whole time, as close as his own breath, as near as the space between one heartbeat and the next. He thought about all the mornings he had risen in his old monastery and felt small, all the times he had believed that his contracted, worried, aching self was the real one. And he wondered, just for a moment, what it might be like to start from the other end, to begin each day not from the smallness, but from the vastness, not from fear, but from the wide, quiet sky that held everything, even the fear, without being diminished by it. He did not know yet, but the question had changed. It was no longer "what am I?" It had become something softer, something more like wonder, and that was enough. For now, that was enough. Let us pause here for a moment. There is no hurry. Simply notice how you are feeling right now. And when you are ready, we will continue together. In the Buddhist scriptures, there is a short verse that has been passed down for centuries. A single moment of clear seeing can illuminate 1,000 years of darkness. Think about that. Not a lifetime of effort, not decades of perfect discipline. A single moment. One flicker of something true, and the darkness that has gathered for longer than you can remember begins to thin. This is a teaching about trust, about the quiet, steady work that is already happening inside you, even when you cannot feel it, especially when you cannot feel it. Because if you are anything like most of us, there is a voice that wonders, a voice that asks, late at night or in the middle of a difficult afternoon, am I doing enough? Am I going in the right direction? Is any of this working? It is a familiar voice, It means well, but it carries a weight that can make the simplest things feel heavy. So let us set that voice down for a little while, the way you might set down a bag you have been carrying for too long, and listen instead to a story about a very different kind of reassurance. In a busy city, in a warm and crowded part of the world, there once lived an old teacher. He was not famous in the way that kings or generals are famous. He had no title, no large following, no grand temple. He lived in a small room above a noisy street, and each day, a handful of seekers would climb the narrow stairs to sit with him and talk. The room was plain. A few cushions on the floor, incense burning in a corner. The walls were bare except for a small photograph of the teacher's own teacher, long since passed from this world. The sounds of the city drifted up through the open windows, the calls of vendors selling vegetables and spices, the rattling of wooden carts over uneven roads, the occasional laughter of children playing somewhere below. And in the middle of it all, this old man, sitting very still, with eyes that seemed to see right through whatever you placed in front of them. He was not what most people expected a spiritual teacher to look like. He was small, quite ordinary in appearance. He had spent most of his life as a simple shopkeeper. But something had opened in him over the years, something vast and quiet, and people who sat in his presence often found themselves feeling lighter, as though they had set down a burden they did not even know they were carrying. He had a way of greeting visitors that was unlike anything they had encountered before. When someone new arrived, still catching their breath from the steep stairs, still adjusting to the dim light and the smell of incense, and the surprising smallness of the room, he would look at them and ask, quite simply, "Where have you come from?" Now, most people answered the obvious way. "I have come from the north," someone might say. Or, "I traveled here from across the sea." But the old teacher was not asking about geography. He was asking something much more interesting. And depending on how you answered, the conversation that followed could change the shape of your entire life. Some visitors understood this. They would pause, sensing the depth beneath the simple question, and offer something more honest. "I do not know where I have come from," one might say. Or, "I have come from a great confusion." And the old teacher would nod, and something in the room would settle, and the real conversation would begin. One afternoon, a young man climbed the stairs. He was restless. You could see it in the way he moved, the way his eyes darted around the room before settling, briefly, on the teacher's face. He sat down on one of the cushions, crossed his legs, and asked a few questions about spiritual matters. How does one find peace? What is the nature of the self? The old teacher answered simply, without hurry, the way someone might give directions to a traveler. The young man listened, nodded a few times, and then stood up and left. The whole visit lasted perhaps 15 minutes. He did not come back the next day, or the day after that. Someone mentioned they had seen him in the market, buying fruit, looking distracted. Someone else heard he had taken a bus to another town, off to visit a different teacher, or perhaps just to wander. He seemed to be the kind of person who was always on his way somewhere else. That evening, as the small group of regular students sat together in the fading light, the incense burned low and the sounds of the city softened into the gentler rhythms of evening. One of the students raised a concern. "That young man who came today," the student said, leaning forward slightly. "He did not seem very serious. He asked his questions and then just left, as though he was sampling sweets at a market stall. He does not have the dedication that this kind of seeking requires." Will he be all right? Is there any hope for someone like that? The old teacher leaned back against the wall and laughed. It was not a small laugh. It was full and warm and unhurried, the kind of laugh that fills a room and makes everyone in it feel, for just a moment, that the world is kinder and simpler than they thought. Hope for him? The old teacher said, still smiling. Oh, it is far too late for that. The students looked at one another, unsure what to make of this. Too late? Someone asked. What do you mean, too late? The old teacher let the silence hold for a moment. Outside, the evening call to prayer was sounding from somewhere across the city. The light in the room had turned golden. The fact that this young man climbed these stairs, the teacher said, the fact that he sat down in this room and asked even one question about the nature of his life, that is enough. It means that something in him, something deeper than his restlessness, deeper than his wandering, has begun to stir. A part of him that knows who he truly is has started to wake up. He paused, looking at the faces around him. The room was quiet now, save for the distant sounds of the city settling into night. Think of it this way, the teacher continued. When a person is sleeping very deeply, they do not ask questions. They do not seek. They do not climb stairs to sit in small rooms and wonder about the nature of things. The very fact that a question arises, any question, even a clumsy one, even one asked on the way out the door, means that the dreamer has begun to stir. And once that stirring begins, it cannot be undone. He smiled, and his voice grew even gentler. And once that part begins to wake, he said, it cannot go back to sleep. Even if he goes out from here and forgets, even if he spends years doing other things, chasing other things, looking everywhere but where the answer actually lives, it does not matter. The seed has been planted, and a seed, once it has found the soil, knows only one direction. There is something in this story that goes against almost everything we are taught about how growth works. We are told, most of us, from very young, that progress is something you earn through effort, that if you stop trying, you fall behind, that the moment you look away, everything you have built begins to crumble. And there is a kind of truth in that, for certain things. If you are building a house, you cannot walk away and expect the walls to raise themselves. If you are learning a language, the words will fade if you never return to them. But the old teacher was pointing to something different. He was pointing to a kind of growth that does not depend on our effort in the way we think it does. A kind of unfolding that is more like the way a flower opens than the way a building is constructed. The Buddha himself used this image often. He compared the awakening of a human being to the blooming of a lotus. The lotus begins in the mud, in the dark, heavy earth beneath the water. It does not begin in the light. It begins in the place that seems least likely to produce something beautiful. And yet, slowly, without anyone instructing it, without anyone standing over it with a checklist, it rises. Through the murky water, through the layers of silt and shadow, until one morning, it breaks the surface and opens. No one taught the lotus how to do this. No one gave it a manual. The knowledge was inside the seed from the very beginning, folded into its cells, the way a melody is folded into silence before it is played. All it needed was water and warmth and time. The lotus does not worry about whether it is blooming correctly. It does not compare itself to the flower beside it. It does not wonder if it started too late or if the mud it grew from was the wrong kind of mud. It does not look at its own unfolding and think, I should be further along by now. It simply opens, because that is its nature. Because opening is what it was made to do. And the old teacher in his small room above the busy street was saying the same thing about that restless young man, and about all of us. The opening has already begun. It began the moment you first wondered, the moment you first felt that quiet stirring, that gentle tug towards something you could not name but knew was real. Whether that was yesterday or 30 years ago, it does not matter. The seed is in the ground, and it knows what to do. Now, you might ask, if the seed knows what to do, then what is the point of practice? What is the point of sitting quietly, or listening to these words, or making any effort at all? And this is a fair and beautiful question. Think of it this way. The seed knows how to grow, but it grows best in good soil, with enough rain, with enough light. When we sit quietly, when we listen, when we make even the smallest space in our busy lives for stillness, we are not forcing the seed to grow. We are simply providing the conditions. We are the rain. We are the good soil. We are the light falling on the surface of the water. There is a difference between forcing something to happen and creating the conditions in which it can happen naturally. And this difference is at the heart of what practice really is. It is not a grim duty. It is not a test you can pass or fail. It is more like tending a garden. You show up, you water, you wait, and you trust that the intelligence of life itself, which has been growing things long before you arrived and will continue long after, knows what it is doing. A gardener does not grab the stem of a flower and pull it upward to make it grow faster. That would be absurd. And yet how often do we do exactly that with ourselves? We push, we strain, we measure, we compare where we are to where we think we should be, and the gap between those two places fills us with a quiet despair. But the garden does not work that way, and neither do we. What if, just for tonight, you allowed yourself to be tended rather than the one doing the tending? What if you let these words, this stillness, this breath, be the rain falling gently on soil that has been waiting for it? You do not need to do anything with the rain. You only need to receive it. This is why the old teacher laughed when his student asked about the young man. Not because the question was foolish, but because the worry behind it, the fear that awakening might somehow be missed, or lost, or squandered, was based on a misunderstanding. You cannot squander what is already planted in you. You can delay it, perhaps. You can wander far from it, but you cannot undo it. The seed remains, and sooner or later, in its own time, in its own beautiful and unpredictable way, it will bloom. There is a line from an old English mystic, written many centuries ago, that captures this feeling perfectly. She lived a quiet life of contemplation in a small stone room beside a church, and after many years of sitting with the mystery of things, she wrote these words: "All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. Not all shall be well if you try hard enough. Not all shall be well if you get it right. Simply, all shall be well. Period." As a statement of deep trust, as a recognition that whatever is unfolding in you, however slowly, however imperfectly, however confusingly, it is moving towards something good. These words have traveled across centuries and they have not lost their power. Perhaps because they do not ask anything of us. They do not instruct. They do not demand. They simply offer a kind of vast, quiet reassurance, the way a parent might hold a child who has woken from a bad dream and whisper, "It is all right. Everything is all right. You are safe." And this is very close to what the old teacher was offering in his small room above the street. Not a technique, not a method, not a complicated philosophy. Just this: trust. Trust what is already growing in you. You do not need to know the entire path. You do not need to see the destination. You only need to trust that the seed is there and that it is doing what seeds do. This is perhaps the gentlest teaching in all of the Buddhist tradition. That your awakening is not something that depends on your perfection. It depends on your willingness to simply be present, again and again, even imperfectly, to keep showing up, to keep listening, to keep making space. The Buddha once said, "Just as the great ocean has one taste, the taste of salt, so this teaching has one taste, the taste of freedom." And that freedom is not something far away. It is as close as the breath you are taking right now, as close as the stillness you are resting in, as close as the quiet wonder you feel when you hear a story that seems to know something about you. Let us return, for a moment, to that young man who climbed the stairs, asked his questions, and wandered off into the city. We do not know what became of him. The story does not tell us. And perhaps that is the point. His story is still being written, just as yours is, just as all of ours are. But somewhere in him, as he walked through the market, as he boarded that bus, as he sat watching the countryside pass by through a dusty window, something was different. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone else would notice, but something, a small warmth perhaps, a faint hum, the memory of a room where incense burned and an old man laughed with such kindness that for a moment, just a moment, the whole world seemed to make sense. The memory of a voice that answered his questions not with complicated philosophy, but with something simpler and truer, the way water answers thirst. That is the seed. It does not announce itself with trumpets. It does not demand attention. It does not require that you recognize it, or name it, or understand it. It simply waits, quietly, in the deepest part of you, with a patience that is older than time, the way the earth waits beneath snow, the way dawn waits behind the darkest hour of the night. And it is already growing. Right now, even as you listen to these words, even as you rest, even as you breathe, it is doing what it has always done, moving toward the light, moving toward wholeness, not because you are forcing it to, but because that is what it does. That is what you do. There is a saying among practitioners, you do not need to go looking for the path. The path is already looking for you. And perhaps tonight, lying here, letting yourself be held by this moment, you can sense the truth of that. Not as an idea, but as a feeling, a warmth, a quiet knowing. You are not behind. You are not lost. You are exactly where the seed needs you to be, and all shall be well. Let us rest here for a breath or two. Feel the weight of your body, held so gently by the ground beneath you. And when you are ready, we will continue on together. The Buddha once said, "I have taught one thing, and one thing only. Suffering and the end of suffering." It sounds almost too simple, does it not? After thousands of pages of scripture, After centuries of monasteries and lineages and philosophical debate, the whole thing comes down to this: there is pain, and there is a way through it. Not around it, not above it, through. And the way through begins with something that might surprise you. It begins with a paradox. A gentle, beautiful, slightly bewildering paradox that sits at the very center of these teachings like a jewel. Let us enter this paradox through a doorway that is very human and very ordinary. Have you ever noticed that the moments in your life that feel most real, most vivid, most alive, are often the ones where joy and sorrow are woven so tightly together that you cannot separate them? Holding a sleeping child and knowing, even in the warmth of that moment, that they will grow and change and one day not fit in your arms this way. Watching the last evening of a holiday that has been truly wonderful, the sky turning colors you will never quite be able to describe, and feeling both the fullness and the fading at the same time. Sitting beside someone you love and sensing, in the quiet, both the beauty of being together and the tenderness of knowing that nothing stays the same forever. Or something even simpler. A cup of tea on a cold morning. The warmth of it in your hands. The way the steam rises and disappears. You are comforted and you are reminded all at once that comfort is a passing thing. And somehow, that does not make it less precious. It makes it more so. These are not sad moments. They are not happy moments. They are something else entirely. Something deeper than either word can hold. Something that our usual language, which loves to put things in separate boxes, does not quite reach. In one tradition of the East, there is a word for this kind of awareness. It translates roughly as happy-sad. Not happy, not sad, but both at once, held gently together, the way two hands might cup water. To be truly present, this tradition says, is to hold both without choosing. To let them exist together, neither one more real than the other, neither one more welcome than the other. This is not a philosophy to be debated. It is a description of what actually happens when we stop sorting our experience into categories and simply allow it to be what it is. And there is a tremendous relief in this, because it means you do not have to push away the sadness to make room for the joy. And you do not have to let go of the joy to make room for the sadness. They were never in conflict. They were always, already, resting together. Now, this idea that presence includes everything and rejects nothing leads us to a teaching that has puzzled seekers for a very long time. And to understand it, let us visit another story. There was once a beloved teacher who lived in a forest monastery. He was known for his warmth, his humor, and his way of saying things that sounded simple but turned out to be bottomless. He had a gift for catching people off guard, for saying the one thing you did not expect to hear, and in that moment of surprise, something would open that all the careful studying in the world had failed to open. Students came from far away to sit with him, and he taught them with patience and great care. One evening, the students were gathered together under the trees. The air was warm, and the insects were singing their endless song. Lantern light flickered on the faces of the circle. The teacher had been speaking about the nature of the self, as he often did, exploring the ancient teachings that say there is no fixed, solid self to be found anywhere in our experience. The students were listening carefully, as they always did, when the teacher paused and said something that made everyone in the circle go very still. You know, all of this teaching about no self, he said. He looked around at them with a slight smile, the kind of smile that told you he was about to turn something upside down. It is not true. You can imagine the silence that followed. These were devoted students. Many of them had spent years, some of them decades, studying the teachings of no self. They had sat in meditation, contemplating it. They had debated it with one another long into the night. They had tried, with great sincerity, to experience it for themselves. And here was their beloved teacher, casually, almost playfully, saying it was not true. A few students shifted uncomfortably. Someone opened their mouth to speak and then closed it again. The insects kept singing, indifferent to the small earthquake happening in the circle. Before anyone could respond, the teacher continued. Of course, he said, all of this teaching about self, that is not true either. And then he was quiet, letting the words settle like leaves falling onto still water. And something in the circle relaxed. Not because anyone understood exactly, but because they sensed they were being invited somewhere new. Somewhere beyond the old argument of this versus that. Somewhere larger. What could he have meant by that? This is not a riddle designed to frustrate you. It is an invitation to step outside the usual way we think about things, the way that says everything must be either this or that, true or false, real or unreal, self or no self. Because the truth, this teacher was suggesting, is bigger than any of those boxes. The word self is a word. It is a sound we make with our mouths, a shape we draw with our thoughts, to point at something we sense about our experience. And the words, no self, are also just words, pointing from a different direction at the same great mystery. Imagine standing in front of a mountain. You describe what you see from the south, green slopes, a river, a village. Your friend describes what they see from the north, bare rock, snow, a glacier. You are both telling the truth. You are both incomplete. The mountain does not care which side you describe. It simply is. And so it is with this question of who we are. Self is one side of the mountain. No self is the other. Both are honest descriptions. Neither is the whole picture. And the mountain, the living, breathing reality of what you actually are, is too large, too alive, too wonderfully strange to fit inside either word. The Buddha himself seemed to understand this deeply. There is a famous moment in the ancient texts where someone comes to the Buddha and asks directly, "Is there a self?" The Buddha remained silent. Then the person asked, "Is there no self?" And the Buddha remained silent again. Not because he did not know, not because he was being evasive, but because any answer, any word, any neat conclusion would have been a kind of reduction. It would have taken something immense and alive and crammed it into something small and still. When asked later why he did not answer, the Buddha said that if he had said, "Yes, there is a self," the questioner would have clung to that idea and made it into something rigid. And if he had said, "No, there is no self," the questioner would have fallen into despair or confusion. Either answer would have been a cage. And the Buddha was not in the business of building cages. He was in the business of opening doors. Sometimes the deepest wisdom is simply to hold the question open, to resist the urge to close it with a neat answer, to let it breathe, to let it remain alive and unresolved, the way a piece of music is most beautiful, not in the final note, but in the spaces between the notes. So what does all of this mean for you, lying here tonight, listening to these words? It means something very gentle and very freeing. It means you do not have to figure yourself out. We spend so much energy, do we not, trying to decide who we are. Am I a confident person or an anxious person? Am I strong or am I fragile? Am I spiritual enough, kind enough, disciplined enough? Am I the person I was 10 years ago, or the person I am trying to become, or someone else entirely? We sort ourselves into categories and then try to live inside them, and when we do not fit, which is most of the time, we feel as though something is wrong with us. But what if nothing is wrong? What if the reason you do not fit neatly into any single description is because you are not a description? You are something far more alive than that. What if you are something more like weather, constantly changing, endlessly moving, sometimes stormy and sometimes still? Sometimes the sky is grey for days and then, without warning, the clouds part and the blue is so vivid it almost hurts. You did not do anything to make the clouds part. You did not earn the blue sky. It simply came, because that is what weather does. It moves. It changes. And through all of it, the sky remains. Vast. Unharmed. Whole. This is very close to what that forest teacher was pointing at when he said those startling words beneath the trees. Not that the teachings are useless, not that all the years of study were wasted, but that the words we use, self, no self, happy, sad, are like cups trying to hold the ocean. Useful, yes, but never quite big enough. And at some point, we are invited to stop staring at the cups and to look at the water they are trying to hold. Let us explore another story that may bring this closer to the heart. There was once a traveler who spent many years searching for a precious jewel. He had heard about this jewel since childhood, sitting at his grandfather's knee, listening to stories by firelight. It was said to be the most beautiful thing in the world, a stone that held every color and reflected light in ways that no other gem could. Kings had sought it. Scholars had written about it. Whole lifetimes had been spent in its pursuit. The traveler searched everywhere. He climbed mountains where the air was so thin he had to stop every few steps to breathe. He crossed deserts where the sand shifted beneath his feet and the horizon shimmered with heat. He studied old maps in dusty libraries and followed trails that faded into nothing. He asked everyone he met, farmers, merchants, monks, wanderers, "Have you seen the jewel? Do you know where it is?" And always the answer was the same, further on. "Keep looking. It is somewhere else." Years passed. The traveler grew older. His legs grew tired. His pack grew heavy. And one afternoon, exhausted and discouraged, he sat down beside a quiet road that wound through a peaceful valley. He leaned against a stone wall that was warm from the sun and closed his eyes. He had nothing left. No maps. No leads. No energy to take another step. And as he sat there, an old woman came walking down the road. She was carrying a basket of vegetables. Nothing remarkable, just ordinary things from her garden. Onions, greens, a few small squash. She moved slowly, unhurried, as though she had nowhere in particular to be. She stopped when she saw the traveler and looked at him with kind, clear eyes. "You look tired," she said. "I am," he replied. I have been searching for the jewel my entire life, and I have not found it. I have looked everywhere. I have given everything I have to this search, and I am beginning to think it does not exist." The old woman set down her basket and sat beside him on the warm stone wall. For a while, neither of them spoke. A bird sang somewhere in the trees above them. A breeze moved through the valley, carrying the scent of grass and earth. Then she asked, very gently, "Tell me, in all your searching, all your traveling, did you ever stop and simply look at where you were?" The traveler thought about this. He thought about all the mountains and deserts and libraries. He thought about all the people he had asked, all the trails he had followed. And he realized something he had never noticed before. "No," he said slowly. "I was always looking ahead, always moving toward the next place. I never really looked at where I was." The old woman smiled. It was a smile of great tenderness, the kind of smile that does not judge but simply understands. "The jewel you are looking for," she said, "is not hidden in some far-off cave. It has been with you all along. It is the very awareness with which you have been searching. The one who sees, the one who wonders. That is the jewel." The traveler sat very still, and in that stillness, something shifted. Not the world around him, that remained exactly the same. The road, the wall, the basket of vegetables, the birds still singing in the trees. But the way he saw it, all changed completely, as though a thin curtain had been drawn back, not from the world, but from his own eyes. And everything, every simple thing, was luminous. This is the jewel of presence. Not something you find by seeking harder, but something you discover by resting more deeply into where you already are. In the Buddhist tradition, there is a beautiful phrase: "Samsara and nirvana are not two. The world of confusion and the world of freedom are not separate places. They are the same place, seen with different eyes. The same road, the same stone wall, the same basket of vegetables. Nothing needs to change except the way we look. You do not need to escape your life to find peace. You do not need to travel to a distant mountain or sit in a cave for 20 years or renounce everything you love. The peace you are looking for is woven into the very fabric of this moment, this breath, this ordinary evening. It is in the sound of your own breathing. It is in the weight of your body resting where it rests. It is in the way the air touches your skin. It is already here. It has always been here. The only thing that hides it from us is our habit of sorting, of choosing, of dividing. This is good, that is bad. This is sacred, that is ordinary. This is the self I want, that is the self I am afraid of. And the gentle teaching that the old forest teacher offered his students that evening under the lantern light is simply this: stop dividing. Let it all be what it is. Let the happy and the sad sit together. Let the self and the no-self rest beside each other like old friends who have finally stopped arguing about who is right. When that happens, even for a moment, something extraordinary opens. Not something new, not something you have to import from elsewhere. Something that was always there, beneath the noise, beneath the sorting, beneath the endless effort to figure it all out. A sense of wholeness that does not depend on any particular feeling or any particular thought. A sense of being complete, not because everything is perfect, but because nothing is missing. Nothing was ever missing. The old teacher in the forest knew this. The traveler sitting on the warm stone wall discovered it. And you, resting here right now, are closer to it than you think. There is a moment, just before sleep, when the mind loosens its grip on the day. The thoughts that seem so important begin to soften and blur. The edges between things become less sharp. The boundary between you and the world grows thin and gentle, like morning mist dissolving in sunlight. In that moment, you are not trying to be anyone. You are not sorting or deciding or evaluating. You are not happy or sad. You are simply here, present, aware, whole. This is not something you need to manufacture or achieve. It is something you can simply allow, like opening a window and letting the evening air come in. The air was always there. You just needed to make a little space. The great paradox at the heart of these ancient teachings is that you are already what you are looking for. The jewel is not hidden. The path is not long. The answer to the question, "Who am I?" is not a word or a concept or a belief. It is this. Whatever this is, right now, in all its mystery and simplicity, you are whole. You have always been whole. And the most beautiful thing about this wholeness is that it does not require you to be anything other than exactly what you are in this moment. Happy and sad, full and empty, vast and small, all of it, all at once, and all of it welcome. Let us pause here. Let your breath be easy. Notice whatever is present, without needing to name it. And when you are ready, we will continue together. There is a question that most of us never think to ask, because the answer seems so obvious. And yet, when you sit with it quietly, it begins to open like a door into a very surprising room. The question is this: who is breathing you right now? Not are you breathing, because clearly you are. The air is moving in and out of your body at this very moment, as it has been doing since the day you arrived in this world. But who is doing it? Did you decide, just now, to take that last breath? Did you plan it? Did you send a message to your lungs and say, "All right, time for another one"? Of course not. It simply happened. The breath came in because it was time for it to come in. And it went out because it was time for it to go out. And you, the one who thinks of yourself as the manager of this whole operation, the planner, the decider, the one who is supposed to be running things, had nothing to do with it. This is where something very interesting begins. Because once you notice this about the breath, you start to notice it about everything. And what you discover is a secret that the ancient teachers have been whispering for a very long time. A secret that is not hidden in a cave or locked in a book, but sitting quietly right in the middle of your everyday experience, waiting to be noticed. There is an old Zen saying, "Sitting quietly, doing nothing, spring comes, and the grass grows by itself." It is a tiny sentence. You could read it in a moment and move on. But if you stay with it, if you let it settle into you the way rain settles into dry earth, it begins to reveal something remarkable about the nature of things. The grass does not try to grow. It does not set an alarm. It does not make a plan. It does not lie awake at night worrying about whether it is growing in the right direction or at the right speed. It simply grows, because growing is what grass does. It is not an achievement. It is not a performance. It is simply life, doing what life does, without anyone at the controls. And this, the ancient teachers discovered, is not only true of grass. It is true of everything. Let us sit with this for a moment, because it is one of the most quietly liberating discoveries in all of the Buddhist teachings. And it begins with something very close to home. Your body. This body that you call yours, that you wash and feed and dress and carry around from place to place. You speak of it as my body, the way you might speak of my coat or my house, as though you own it, as though it belongs to you and must answer to you. But consider this. If you truly owned your body, you could tell it what to do, and it would listen. You could say, "Do not be tired," and it would not be tired. You could say, "Do not ache," and the ache would stop. You could say, "Stay exactly as you are. Do not change. Do not age. Do not slow down," and it would obey. But it does not obey, does it? It has its own rhythm, its own calendar, its own quiet intelligence that has nothing to do with your preferences. It gets hungry when it wants to get hungry, regardless of whether the timing is convenient. It gets sleepy in the middle of an important afternoon and wide awake in the middle of a quiet night. It heals at its own pace, not yours. A cut on the hand mends itself while you sleep, without your supervision, without your knowledge, knitting itself back together with a skill you could never replicate if you tried. Your heart beats without being asked. Your stomach digests without receiving instructions. Your eyes blink, your nails grow, your hair turns whatever color it pleases. All of it happening constantly, faithfully, without a single memo from you. And this is not a failing. This is actually wonderful news. Because what it reveals is that the body is not a machine you are operating. It is not a vehicle you are driving. It is more like a river you are traveling in. And the river knows where it is going. It has always known. It knew before you arrived, and it will continue to know long after you stop trying to steer. Let us explore a story about this. Once, in a monastery near a wide, slow river, a young student went to see an elder teacher. The student had been practicing meditation for some time and had become troubled by something. "Teacher," the student said, sitting down across from the old woman, "I have been watching my breath as you instructed, and I have noticed something strange." "Tell me," the teacher said. "The breath seems to breathe itself," the student said, frowning slightly. "I sit and I watch, and I try to follow it, but the more I watch, the more I realize I am not doing it at all. It just happens. The air comes in, and the air goes out, and I have nothing to do with it." The teacher nodded, as though the student had just told her that water was wet. "And this troubles you?" she asked. "Yes," the student said, "because if I am not breathing the breath, then who is? If I am not in charge of even this simple thing, then what am I in charge of?" The teacher was quiet for a moment. Outside, through the open window, they could hear the river moving past, slow and steady, the sound it had been making for 1,000 years. "Let me ask you something," the teacher said. "This morning, before you came to see me, did you have any thoughts?" "Of course," the student said. "Did you choose them?" The student paused. "What do you mean?" "The thoughts that came this morning. The worries, the memories, the little pictures and fragments that floated through your mind. Did you sit down and decide, now I will think about this, Now I will think about that. Or did they simply come? The student thought about this carefully. They just came, he admitted. I did not choose them. And the feelings, the teacher continued gently. The moments of calm, the flickers of restlessness, that brief sadness that came and went, did you invite those? No, the student said, more slowly now. They just arrived. And the sounds you heard this morning, the birds, the wind, the bell for morning sitting, did you make those sounds happen? No. The teacher let the silence hold for a moment. The river murmured outside. A breeze stirred the curtain at the window. So, she said softly. The breath breathed itself. The thoughts thought themselves. The feelings arose and passed on their own. The sounds came to your ears without invitation. And yet, here you are. You experienced all of it. You were present for all of it. It all happened perfectly, beautifully, without you needing to manage any of it. She leaned forward slightly, and her voice grew even gentler. You asked who is in charge, she said. And the answer is, no one. No one is directing this. No one needs to. And that is perhaps the most wonderful thing you will ever discover. Because it means that the part of you that has been trying so hard to hold it all together, to be the manager, the controller, the one who never rests, that part can finally put down its work. Not because the work is finished, but because it was never needed in the first place. This teaching, that life moves through us rather than being controlled by us, runs through the Buddhist tradition like a golden thread. The Buddha spoke of it often. He pointed to the 5 great rivers of experience, the body, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, and awareness itself, and he said that none of them belong to anyone. They are not mine. They are not me. They are a flowing, changing, endlessly moving process, like water in a river, like weather in the sky, like music that plays and then is gone. And this is not a cold or frightening idea, though it might sound that way at first. It is, in its own way, one of the warmest and most comforting things you can discover, because it means you can relax, truly relax, not just on the surface, but all the way down. You can stop trying to control everything. You can stop gripping the steering wheel of your life so tightly, your knuckles white, your jaw clenched, your shoulders up around your ears, and discover that the road itself knows where it is going, that it has always known, that your grip was never what kept you safe. Think about your day today, or yesterday, or any day you can remember. Did you plan every moment of it? Did you orchestrate every sensation, every shift of mood, every flicker of thought? Did you decide in advance which memories would surface and which feelings would visit and how long each one would stay? Or did most of it simply unfold on its own, like a story being told by a voice that knows it very well? If you are honest, you will probably find that the vast majority of your day happened by itself. The feelings came and went by themselves. The thoughts arose and dissolved by themselves. The body moved and rested and breathed by itself. You were there for all of it. You experienced all of it. But you did not make it happen any more than you make the sun rise in the morning. And the sun has been rising just fine without your help. There is a beautiful image for this in the old teachings. They compare our experience to a great river. The river is always moving, always changing. Sometimes it flows fast over stones, catching the light. Sometimes it moves slow and deep through wide, quiet valleys. Sometimes it is wide and calm, sometimes narrow and swirling, but it is always flowing, always going. And the water that passes by you right now is not the same water that passed by a moment ago. It has already gone downstream, replaced by new water, which is itself already going, already on its way to somewhere else. You cannot hold the river. You cannot freeze it in place and say, this is my river. This is the part I want to keep. You cannot bottle the best moments and set aside the ones you did not enjoy. The moment you try to close your hand around it, it has already slipped through your fingers. Not because the river is cruel or indifferent or playing a trick on you, but because flowing is what rivers do. It is their nature. It is their gift. And it is yours too. And here is where the teaching becomes very tender, because this same flowing quality applies not only to the breath and the thoughts and the sensations, but to everything. To this very day, to this very evening. Think about today. What happened? Perhaps you rose this morning and ate something and spoke to someone and went about your business. Perhaps there were small moments of beauty you have already half forgotten. The light falling a certain way through a window, the taste of something warm, the sound of a voice you know well. Perhaps you felt tired or restless or peaceful or bored or some complicated mixture of all of these things. And now here you are, at the end of it, resting. But where did today go? It was here. It was vivid and real and full of detail. You could have pointed to it and said, this is my day. This is real. This is happening. And it was. But now it is fading, even as you think about it. The morning is already hazy like a photograph left in the sun. The afternoon is blurred. Specific moments that felt so sharp, so important a few hours ago, are already dissolving, like breath on a cold window, like footprints on a beach when the tide comes in. And yesterday? That is even further away. Already it feels more like a story someone told you than something you actually lived. And last week? Last month? Last year? The details soften, the colors fade, the edges blur, and what remains is not the event itself, but something more like a feeling. A trace. A faint impression, like the warmth that stays on a chair after someone has stood up and walked away. This is not sad. Please hear that gently. This is simply what it means to live in a world of flow. And the ancient teachers pointed to this, not to make us feel loss, but to help us feel something quite different. A sense of lightness, a sense of ease, a great and tender unburdening. Because if nothing can be held, then nothing needs to be held. If everything is passing through, then you are free to let it pass. You do not need to grip this moment, because the next one is already coming, already forming, already bringing with it whatever it brings. And you do not need to mourn the last moment, because it has done what it came to do, and it has left you exactly where you need to be. The Buddha put it very simply. All things are like a river, he taught. You cannot step into the same water twice. Back in the monastery by the river, the young student sat quietly for a long time after the teacher finished speaking. He listened to the water moving outside the window. He felt the air moving in and out of his body, this breath that had been breathing itself his whole life without once asking for thanks. And for the first time, instead of feeling troubled by the fact that it was all happening on its own, he felt something else entirely. He felt grateful and, strangely, lighter, as though he had been carrying a heavy pack for a very long journey, and someone had just said, very kindly, "You can set that down now." It was never yours to carry. Because if the breath could breathe itself, if the thoughts could think themselves, if the feelings could come and go without his permission or his planning, then perhaps he did not need to carry it all. Perhaps he had never needed to carry it all. Perhaps his whole life, with all its worrying and planning and managing and controlling, had been like a man standing in a river, exhausting himself trying to push the water downstream, never once looking down to realize that the water was already going that way on its own. Had always been going that way. Would always go that way. With or without his help. He looked at the teacher and he smiled. It was the first real smile he had given in a long time. "So, what do I do?" he asked. And the teacher smiled back, a warm and easy smile. The smile of someone who has been waiting patiently for exactly this question. "Float," she said. This is what the ancient teachings of selflessness really come down to. Not a philosophical argument, not an intellectual position, but an invitation. An invitation to stop pushing the river, to stop pretending that you are the one making everything happen, and to discover, with relief and maybe even with joy, that you are being carried. The breath carries you. The heartbeat carries you. The turning of the earth carries you. The whole immense, gentle machinery of life carries you, exactly as it has been doing since before you were born, and will continue to do long after you have forgotten to worry about it. You are not in charge, and that is not a loss. It is a homecoming. There is a verse in the ancient Dhammapada, the collected sayings of the Buddha, that puts it this way: "All things arise and pass away. When you see this, you are above sorrow. This is the shining way, above sorrow. Not because the passing is not real, but because the passing is the river, and the river is not something to be grieved. It is something to be trusted. It is something to rest in. It is something that has been carrying you faithfully, tenderly, all along. So let yourself be carried now. Let the breath do what it knows how to do. Let the thoughts come and go like clouds reflected in moving water. Let this moment be what it is, and then let the next moment come. You do not need to manage any of it. You never did. You are the river, and the river knows the way." Let us rest here for a moment. Let everything settle, and when you are ready, we will continue together. Have you ever looked at something very closely? So closely that it stopped being what you thought it was? A child does this naturally. They pick up a leaf and hold it right up to their eye, and suddenly it is not a leaf anymore. It is a landscape. A whole world of veins and ridges and tiny hairs and translucent green windows where the light comes through. What was one simple thing becomes 100 fascinating things, and the child is lost in wonder, because the closer they look, the more there is to see. They did not add anything to the leaf. They simply paid closer attention, and the leaf rewarded them with a universe. We do this sometimes as adults too, though we often forget. We look at the night sky and suddenly remember that each of those tiny points of light is a sun, unimaginably far away, each one perhaps warming worlds we will never see. Or we hold the hand of someone we love and notice, really notice, the texture of their skin, the warmth, the pulse beneath, and for a moment, the ordinary hand becomes the most extraordinary thing in the world. Something very similar happens when we begin to pay close attention to our own inner experience. The things that seem solid and simple and settled start to shimmer. They start to move. They start to reveal a depth and a delicacy that we never noticed before, because we were moving too fast, or because we had simply assumed we already knew what was there. And this can be one of the most beautiful discoveries of a lifetime. It can also, at first, feel a little like the ground is shifting beneath your feet. So let us talk about that, gently, with care. In the Zen tradition, there is a saying, great doubt, great awakening. Small doubt, small awakening. No doubt, no awakening. This is a strange thing to hear, because most of us think of doubt as a problem, something to be overcome, something that means we are not yet where we should be. But the old Zen teachers saw it differently. They understood that the moments when our certainty softens, when the familiar ground becomes unfamiliar, when what we were sure about begins to tremble, these are not moments of failure. They are moments of opening. Think of it like walking on a frozen lake. For a long time, the ice seems solid. You trust it completely. You walk and do not think twice about what is beneath you. And then one day, you hear a sound, a small creak, a whisper of movement beneath the surface. And you realize, perhaps for the first time, that the ground you are standing on is not as fixed as you believed. Now, this can be frightening. Of course it can. But it can also be the beginning of something else. Because beneath the ice, there is water, and water is alive. It moves. It flows. It holds more than ice ever could. Let us explore what this looks like in the landscape of our inner life. When someone begins to pay very close attention to their experience, whether sitting quietly or simply being still for a while, something remarkable happens. The things that seemed solid begin to soften. A single breath, which used to seem like one event, one inhale, one exhale, begins to reveal itself as a whole symphony of tiny sensations. The very beginning of the inhale, that first cool trickle of air at the nostrils. The way the chest lifts, gently, like a bird opening its wings. The slight pause at the top, that quiet moment of fullness. Then the softening of the exhale, the warmth, the release, the settling. And within each of those, even finer movements, like ripples within ripples on the surface of a pond. One breath, and there are 100 small events happening inside it. The body, which used to feel like one solid thing, a single object with clear edges, begins to reveal itself as a field of constantly shifting sensation. Warmth here, coolness there, a tingle along the surface of the skin, a pulse deep inside, a hum so subtle you never noticed it before, like the vibration of a tuning fork held against your chest. What seemed like a wall of stone turns out to be more like a cloud of fireflies, each one flickering in and out of existence, none of them fixed, all of them dancing in some pattern too beautiful and too complex to name. Even thoughts, those things that seem so heavy and important and permanent, begin to show their true nature when you look closely. A worry that seemed like a boulder, immovable and crushing, turns out to be more like a wisp of smoke. A memory that seemed so vivid and complete turns out to be a collage of fragments, sounds and colors, and half-formed feelings loosely stitched together, already dissolving even as you look at them, like morning frost in the first warmth of the sun. This is what the old teachers meant when they spoke of impermanence, not as a grim philosophy or a sad conclusion, but as a description of what you actually see when you look closely enough. Everything is moving. Everything is changing. Everything is more like music than like stone. And music, as you know, is not diminished by the fact that it moves. It is made beautiful by it. Now, here is where tenderness is needed. Real tenderness, the kind you would offer a friend who is going through something new and unfamiliar. Because when the solid world begins to soften like this, when the things you counted on as firm and fixed start to reveal themselves as fluid and changing, it is natural for something in us to feel uneasy. There is a part of us, a very loyal and hard-working part, that has spent a lifetime building a floor to stand on. A sense of, this is who I am, this is what is real, this is what I can count on. And when that floor starts to feel less firm, a kind of nervousness can arise. A flutter in the chest, a subtle tightening, a whisper that says, wait, what is happening? Where did the solid ground go? The old teachers spoke about this with great kindness. They did not pretend it was easy. They did not wave it away or tell people to simply try harder. They acknowledged it the way a wise parent acknowledges a child's fear of the dark. Yes, it is unfamiliar. Yes, it is new. And yes, you are safe. If you are resting quietly some evening and a feeling of groundlessness comes, a gentle sense that things are less solid than they used to seem, the teaching is simply to notice it, to acknowledge it the way you might acknowledge a gust of wind passing through an open window. Ah, there it is. The ground is shifting, and then to let it be, to let it pass through you as the wind passes through the room. Because like everything else, it is passing through. It will not stay forever. It is not a sign that something is going wrong. It is a sign that something is opening up, that you are seeing more clearly, that the leaf is becoming a landscape. The Buddha offered a beautiful reassurance for moments like these. He said, in the sky, there is no distinction of east and west. People create distinctions out of their own minds and then believe them to be true. What he was pointing to is that the solid ground we think we are losing was never as solid as we believed. The lines we drew, the boundaries we created, the firm edges of me and not me, these were always more like drawings on water than carvings in stone. And as they soften, what is revealed is not chaos or emptiness, but something much more wonderful. A sense of connection, a sense that everything is related to everything else. Let us explore a story about this. Once, long ago, a student was sitting in a garden with a wise teacher. It was evening, and the garden was quiet. Somewhere nearby, a bell was ringing, struck by a light breeze that moved through the trees. The student listened to the bell and then asked, "Teacher, what is it that rings? Is it the bell, or is it the wind?" The teacher listened too, tilting their head slightly, as though hearing the question for the first time. "What do you think?" the teacher asked. "Well," the student said, "the bell rings because the wind pushes it. So it must be the wind." "But without the bell," the teacher said, "would there be this sound?" "No," the student admitted. "There must be a bell, and without the air between them to carry the vibration." "No, there must be air, and without your ear to receive it, without your mind to recognize it as a bell." The student was quiet for a long moment. "So what rings?" the teacher asked again, smiling gently. "The wind?" The bell? The air? Your ear? Your mind? Where does the sound begin and where does it end? The student looked out at the garden, at the trees moving in the breeze, at the last light of evening touching the leaves with gold, at the shadows beginning to gather beneath the hedges, and he realized he could not find an edge. He could not find the place where the bell stopped and the wind began, or where the sound stopped and the listening began. It was all one thing. One seamless, unbroken event, stretching in every direction, connected to everything. It all rings, the student said quietly. Everything rings. The teacher nodded, and his eyes were kind. Now you are hearing. This is what the ancient teachers called interdependence, or sometimes co-arising. The understanding that nothing exists entirely on its own. Nothing appears out of nowhere, complete and separate. Everything arises in relationship to everything else. The way a wave arises in relationship to the ocean, the way a shadow arises in relationship to the light. Everything is connected to everything else, the way threads are connected in a piece of cloth. Pull one thread, even gently, and the whole fabric responds. The bell does not ring alone. It rings because of the wind, and the metal, and the craftsperson who shaped it long ago, and the mountain where the ore was found, and the rain that fell on that mountain, and the clouds that carried the rain, and the ocean that gave rise to the clouds. One moment of sound, and the whole universe is quietly, invisibly involved. And you are no different. You are here tonight because of a chain of moments so long and so intricately woven that no mind could ever trace it to its true beginning. Every person who has ever spoken kindly to you, every hand that has ever prepared food you have eaten, every teacher, every friend, every stranger who held a door open or offered a smile on a difficult day, every season that has turned, every river that has found its way to the sea, all of it brought you here, to this moment, to this breath, to this quiet listening. You are not separate. You have never been separate, not for a single moment. You are woven into the fabric of everything, as intimately and as thoroughly as a thread is woven into cloth. And this is not a loss of self. It is a discovery of belonging, a deep and gentle recognition that you are not a small, isolated thing trying to make your way through a vast and indifferent world. You are the world, looking at itself with wonder, a unique and irreplaceable expression of the whole. The Buddha said, all things arise due to conditions. One thing is the condition for the next. One moment gives rise to the next moment, which gives rise to the next. Not in a mechanical way, like dominoes falling, but in the way a song gives rise to the next note. There is a beauty in it, a rightness, a kind of music that you can begin to hear when you stop insisting on separateness and simply listen to how things actually are. There is a passage from a great poet and playwright, written many centuries ago, that captures this feeling with extraordinary grace. He was writing about a grand celebration that had come to an end, actors bowing, music fading, the stage growing quiet. And he gave these words to one of his characters, an old and wise figure looking out at the fading evening. The gist of what he said was this: all of our revels, all of our grand occasions, are made of the same substance as dreams. The towers we build, the palaces we admire, the great globe itself, all of it will one day dissolve, like a cloud that was beautiful for an hour, and then drifted apart and was gone. Leave not a trace behind. And we ourselves are made of this same substance. Our lives are brief and luminous and surrounded on all sides by a great, peaceful rest. Now, this was not written as a lament. It was not a cry of despair. It was written as a kind of wonder, a quiet, clear-eyed wonder at the nature of things. Because if everything is made of this dreamlike substance, this shimmering, impermanent, endlessly changing fabric, then something remarkable follows. Nothing needs to be grasped. Nothing needs to be held tight. You can let the cloud be a cloud for as long as it is a cloud, and when it changes shape, you can let it change. You can let the evening be an evening. You can let the celebration be what it was. You can let this moment be exactly what it is, beautiful and passing, without trying to pin it down or make it stay forever. And in that letting go, there is not loss. There is spaciousness. There is room to breathe. There is the extraordinary relief of discovering that you do not need to hold the world together, because the world was never something that could fall apart. It was already held by something larger and quieter and more patient than any hand. This is perhaps the deepest meaning of the word wholeness as we have been exploring it tonight. Not wholeness as in everything is perfect and nothing changes, but wholeness as in everything is connected, everything is flowing, and nothing is left out. The bell and the wind and the ear and the mind, the cloud and the tower and the dream, you and the breath and the evening and the stars. All of it, one cloth. All of it, one river. All of it, whole. And the beauty of this wholeness is that it includes everything. The solid moments and the soft ones. The times when you feel strong and certain, and the times when the ground shifts and you are not sure of anything. It holds the firefly moments, the shimmering, dancing, flickering aliveness of things. And it holds the quiet moments when everything settles into stillness and there is nothing to do and nowhere to go. You do not need to understand this with your mind. You do not need to figure it out or write it down or have it make logical sense. You only need to feel it. And you are feeling it right now. In the way your body rests. In the way the breath comes and goes without your help. In the way this moment is holding you, gently. The way the ocean holds everything that floats upon it. Without effort, without strain, with a patience that has no end. There is nothing to fear in the softening of the ground, because beneath the ground there is water, and the water is alive, and it has been holding you all along. Let us pause here. Let the breath come and go on its own, and when you are ready, we will continue together. There is a teaching in the Buddhist tradition that is rarely spoken about, yet it may be the most important one of all. It is not about the nature of the universe or the mechanics of the mind. It is about something much closer to home. It is about tenderness. The tenderness we owe to the parts of ourselves we have not yet learned to love. The Buddha said, "You could search the whole world over and never find anyone more deserving of your love than yourself." Let that land for a moment. Not as a slogan, not as something printed on a wall, but as a truth spoken by someone who had looked very deeply into the nature of things and come back with this one quiet certainty. You deserve your own kindness. All of you. Even the parts you have hidden away. Especially those. Here is something that happens more often than we might expect. A person hears the teachings about selflessness, about emptiness, about the spacious, open nature of things, and something in them nods and says, "Yes, I know this already. I have always felt like nothing. But this is not the same thing. Not at all. There is a vast difference between the spacious emptiness the ancient teachers pointed to, which is full of light and possibility and peace, and the hollow emptiness that comes from carrying, for a very long time, a feeling that you are not quite enough, that something in you is missing, that others seem to have a solidity, a worthiness, a belonging that somehow you were not given. The first kind of emptiness is like the sky, open, boundless, luminous, able to hold everything, clouds and storms and stars alike, without being harmed by any of it. When the ancient teachers spoke of emptiness, this is what they meant. A spaciousness so vast that nothing can diminish it. A peace so deep that nothing can disturb it. This is the emptiness of freedom. And it is beautiful. The second kind is more like a room that has been locked for a long time. Dark, cold, quiet in the wrong way. Not the quiet of peace, but the quiet of something that stopped hoping anyone would come. This is not freedom. This is a wound wearing the clothing of wisdom. And it is far more common than we might think. One feels like the open sky at dawn. The other feels like a stone in the chest. They may use similar words. I am nothing. Nothing matters. There is no self here. But the feeling underneath those words is completely different. And one of the most important things we can ever learn is how to tell these two apart. Because confusing them, mistaking an old hurt for a spiritual truth, can keep a person stuck for a very long time. It can make them think they have arrived somewhere deep, when really they are sitting in the dark, needing not more philosophy, but more warmth. Where does this second kind of emptiness come from? It comes, most often, from very ordinary things. Not from some great dramatic event, though sometimes that too, but from the small, accumulating moments of a life. The times we needed to be seen and were not quite seen. The times we reached out and the hand that met ours was distracted, or tired, or simply not there. The ways we learned, without anyone meaning to teach us, that certain parts of us were not welcome. That we were too much of this or not enough of that. That to be loved, we needed to be different from what we were. No one does this on purpose usually. The people who raised us were doing their best with what they had, which was often not quite enough, because the people who raised them were doing the same. It is a long chain of imperfect love, stretching back through the generations, each link doing what it can, and each one leaving small gaps where something needed to be and was not. These are not rare experiences. They are as common as breathing. Nearly everyone, if they are honest, and if the evening is quiet enough for honesty, carries some version of this. A quiet sense, tucked away beneath the surface of a capable and functioning life, that something at the core is not quite right, not quite worthy, not quite whole. A feeling so familiar that we have stopped noticing it, the way you stop hearing a sound that has been playing for a very long time. And so we build a life on top of it, the way a city is built over old ruins. We learn to function. We learn to smile. We learn to be competent and busy and useful. But underneath, in the quiet hours, the old feeling is still there, waiting, not because it wants to hurt us, but because it has never been listened to. There is a beautiful story about this. Let us spend some time with it. because it holds a teaching that is worth more than 1,000 philosophies. A person, weary from long days of work and worry, walked out one evening into the countryside. It was autumn. The fields had been harvested and lay open and bare. The trees were half undressed, their leaves scattered on the ground like bright coins. The air was cool and carried the smell of earth and wood smoke. This person walked until they found a quiet place, far from the road, far from the sounds of the village. A meadow at the edge of a wood, where the last golden light of the day was resting on the grass like something spilled. A place where the only voices were the wind in the dry leaves and the occasional call of a bird settling into the branches for the night. And there, they sat down on the cool earth. They did not bring a book. They did not bring a task or a plan. They simply sat, the way the old teachers recommend, and let everything rest. All the busyness, all the planning, all the striving and solving, and trying to hold the world together. They let it settle, the way mud settles in a jar of water when you finally stop stirring, and the water begins to clear. And as the stillness deepened, as the last light faded and the first stars began to appear, something began to happen. From the quiet, from somewhere very far inside, something approached. Not a person, not an animal, but a feeling, an old, familiar feeling that they had spent most of their life avoiding. It came slowly, carefully, the way a shy creature comes out of the woods at dusk, when the noise has died down and the coast seems clear. One step, then another, testing the silence to see if it would hold. It was a feeling they had no good name for. Part sadness, part loneliness, part something even older than those, something from so far back they could not remember when it began. It was the feeling they ran from every day, the one they filled with work and noise and distraction, the one they had decided, long ago, was too large and too frightening to face. But this evening, something was different. Maybe it was the tiredness. Maybe it was the beauty of the autumn light. Maybe it was simply that they had run far enough and long enough that there was nowhere left to run. Whatever the reason, instead of turning away, they stayed. The feeling came closer. And as it came, instead of overwhelming them, it did something unexpected. It began to speak. Not in words, exactly, but in the way that feelings speak when they are finally given room. It told its story. The story of being small. The story of not being heard. The story of all the doors that had closed, all the arms that had not opened, all the moments when love had been needed and something else had come instead. And as this person listened, really listened, with the same quality of attention they might give to a frightened child who had finally found the courage to speak, something began to shift. A poem describes this moment perfectly. It says that the thing we are afraid of comes to us, and if we listen, it sings a song. And as it sings, it becomes less afraid of us, and we become less afraid of it. This is one of the most healing things a human being can do. To sit still, to let the old, avoided thing approach, and to listen to it with kindness. Now, here is where the teaching becomes truly remarkable, because what the ancient teachers discovered, and what many people find when they are willing to sit with their old wounds this way, is that every difficult feeling, when it is truly met with compassion, contains its opposite. This is not a trick. It is not a technique. It is simply what happens when a feeling that has been locked away for a long time is finally given space and warmth. Consider loneliness. Not the ordinary kind, the kind you feel when your friends are busy and you have an empty evening, but the deep kind, the kind that lives in your bones, the kind that has been with you so long it feels like part of who you are. When this deep loneliness is finally allowed to tell its story, when it is held the way you would hold something precious and fragile, something remarkable can happen. Slowly, gently, the loneliness begins to change. Not into happiness, exactly, but into something more like aloneness. A quiet, peaceful sense of being here, by yourself, but not abandoned. And within that aloneness, strangely, a feeling of connection begins to arise. A sense that you are alone in the way a tree is alone in a field, singular and rooted, and yet utterly connected to the earth beneath it, to the sky above it, to the wind that moves through its branches. Alone, and yet part of everything. The loneliness, it turns out, was never the deepest truth. It was a shell, and inside the shell, waiting all this time, was belonging. Or consider something else. Perhaps you have noticed in yourself, or in people you know, a pattern of trying very hard, pushing, striving, muscling through. There is a kind of forcefulness that comes not from genuine strength, but from a deep, unspoken fear that if you stop pushing, everything will fall apart. That you are not enough as you are. That you have to earn your place, your worth, your right to be here, through sheer effort. When this pattern is met with patience and with tenderness, when it is allowed to rest, even for a moment, when someone finally says to it, "You have been working so hard. You can stop now. You are safe," something surprising can emerge. Beneath the pushing, beneath the effort, beneath the lifelong need to prove and perform and earn your place, there is a quieter kind of strength. A strength that has nothing to do with striving. It is more like the strength of a mountain. It does not try to be strong. It does not lift weights or set goals or compete with the mountain next to it. It simply is. It sits on the earth, solid and patient, and the seasons pass over it, rain and sun and snow, and it remains. Not because it is trying to remain, but because remaining is its nature. This is your natural strength. It has been here all along, beneath the efforting, beneath the proving, as quiet and as patient as stone. Not the borrowed, anxious, effortful kind of strength, but the kind that was here before you started trying. The kind that does not need anyone's approval. The kind that simply knows, in its bones, without needing to announce it, "I am here. I belong here." That is enough. And there is one more transformation worth mentioning, because it touches something very deep. Sometimes, beneath all the busyness and distraction of a life, there is a feeling of meaninglessness, a sense that nothing really matters, that it is all just one thing after another, going nowhere in particular, signifying nothing. This feeling can be very heavy to carry, and most of us push it down as quickly as we can because it seems too bleak to face. But when meaninglessness is met with the same gentle attention, when it is allowed to be here without being resisted or argued with, it too begins to shift. And what emerges from it is not meaning, exactly, not a neatly packaged purpose or a mission statement for your life, but something better. A sense of wonder, a sense of astonishment that anything exists at all, that you exist, that there is a world and light and the sound of wind in trees and the feeling of being alive in a body on a turning planet. The meaninglessness, when fully allowed, opens into a kind of fresh amazement. The way a child sees the world before they have learned to take it for granted. Every color vivid, every sound new, every moment an unrepeatable gift. The Buddha described this quality as beginner's mind, the mind that does not assume it already knows, the mind that meets each moment as if for the first time. It is not something we need to invent. It is what is already there, beneath the heaviness, waiting for us to stop and notice. So here is the gentle truth at the heart of this teaching. The parts of yourself that you have been avoiding, the old aches, the quiet feelings of not being enough, are not enemies to be conquered. They are not problems to be solved. They are more like children who have been left in a dark room for too long, waiting for someone to come and open the door and say, simply, "I see you. You are welcome here." And when you do that, when you offer that kind of attention to the forgotten corners of your own heart, something wonderful happens. Not all at once, usually, but gradually, like dawn. The old wounds begin to soften. The old identities, I am the lonely one. I am the one who tries too hard. I am the one for whom nothing has meaning. These begin to loosen their grip. And what is revealed beneath them is not another wound. It is warmth. It is aliveness. It is the wholeness that was there all along, hidden not because it was lost, but because something was sitting on top of it. You are not your wounds. You never were. You are what is beneath them. And what is beneath them is something very good. An old teacher once said, "The mind creates the difficulty, and the heart crosses it." You do not need to think your way through the old pain. You only need to meet it with something warmer than thought. And that something, that warmth, that willingness to sit with what is difficult and say, "I am here, I am listening, you are safe." That is the deepest kind of love there is. There is a verse in the ancient teachings that says, "Hatred never ceases by hatred, but by love alone is healed." And this is true not only of hatred between people, but of the quiet, persistent unkindness we sometimes direct at ourselves. The inner voice that criticizes, the habitual flinch away from our own tenderness, the long habit of believing we are less than we are. These too are healed by love, not by more effort, not by more discipline, not by figuring it out, but by the simple, brave, quiet act of turning toward ourselves with compassion. You carry within you everything you need. The sky-like spaciousness of your true nature, vast and open and unhurt, and the tender, particular heart of a living being who has known joy and sorrow and everything between. Both of these are you. Both of these are whole. And they are not as different from each other as you might think. Let us rest here for a moment. Let the breath be soft. And when you are ready, we will continue together. There is a line from an old teacher that may be the most beautiful sentence ever spoken about what it means to be alive. He said, "Wisdom tells me I am nothing. Love tells me I am everything. Between these two, my life moves." Read that again, slowly, in the quiet of your mind. Wisdom tells me I am nothing. Love tells me I am everything. Between these two, my life moves. This is the territory we have been walking toward all evening. The place where the vast and the intimate come together, where the open sky meets the beating heart, where the freedom of emptiness and the warmth of a single human life are not two different things, but one. For a long time, many people have carried the idea that spiritual depth means becoming detached, rising above, letting go of the world and its messy, complicated, tender entanglements, floating free, beyond the reach of pain, beyond the pull of love, beyond the need for anything or anyone. And there is a grain of truth in this. There are seasons when stepping back is necessary, times when silence and solitude are exactly what the heart needs. The Buddha himself spent years in the forest before his awakening. Solitude has its place. But here is what the deepest teachers have always known, and what the Buddha himself demonstrated in the decades after his awakening. Freedom is not the end of the story. It is the beginning. True freedom does not pull us away from the world, but then it sends us back into it. More open, more tender, more willing to be touched by things, more capable of love, not less. The great Zen master Dogen put it this way. He said, "To be awakened is to be intimate with all things, not distant from all things, not above all things, intimate, close, present, the way you are present with a child who has climbed into your lap, the way you are present with a cup of tea on a cold morning, feeling its warmth against your palms, the way you are present, sometimes, in those unplanned moments when the world seems to lean in and whisper, 'Are you paying attention?' Because this is it. This is the whole thing, right here." Let us explore a story that shows what this looks like when it blooms fully in a life. There was once a great spiritual leader, a teacher of teachers, who was known throughout his tradition for his extraordinary compassion. He had practiced for many lifetimes, the stories say, cultivating kindness the way a gardener cultivates a rare and precious flower. Patient, steady, devoted, lifetime after lifetime, until compassion was no longer something he did but something he was. He would hold ceremonies from time to time in great halls filled with incense and candlelight. And in his most sacred ceremony, he would place upon his head an ancient crown that had been passed down through many generations of teachers before him. The crown was very old. It carried within it the weight and the warmth of all those who had worn it before, like a cup that has held so many teas it has absorbed their fragrance. And in placing this crown on his head, he would become, in that moment, the living embodiment of boundless compassion. The old paintings show this figure with 1,000 arms, each one reaching out in a different direction, each one offering help, offering comfort, offering whatever was needed to whoever needed it. 1,000 arms. Think about that for a moment. Not 2, not 10, 1,000. One for every kind of suffering, one for every kind of need, one for the person who is lonely, one for the person who is afraid, one for the person who has lost their way, one for the person who does not even know they need help. Reaching in every direction at once, tirelessly, endlessly, the way sunlight reaches into every corner of a room, without choosing favorites, without calculating who deserves it, without ever running out. Now, you might hear this and think it sounds grand and cosmic and very far from your own life. 1,000 arms of compassion. What does that have to do with a quiet evening and the familiar sounds of your home and the gentle weight of your body resting where it rests? But here is the remarkable thing. People who had the chance to sit with this teacher to actually be in his presence and speak with him face to face, did not describe an experience of something cosmic or impersonal or otherworldly. They described something much simpler and much more extraordinary than that. They said that when you sat in front of him and spoke, he listened, really listened, not politely, not with one ear while the other was somewhere else, already thinking about the next person or the next task, but with his whole being, as though, in that moment, there was no one else in the world, as though your small, ordinary life, with all its small, ordinary concerns, with all its tangled hopes and familiar worries, was the very thing he had been waiting his whole long life to hear about. As though you mattered, not in a grand way, in the most personal way possible. 1,000 arms, and every single one of them reaching toward you. This is what intimacy looks like at its deepest. Not a withdrawal from the particular into the universal, not an escape from the personal into the cosmic, but the opposite, a pouring of the universal into the personal, a bringing of all that vastness, all that spaciousness, all that boundless compassion into the single, specific, unrepeatable moment of one human being sitting in front of another and saying, "Tell me, I am listening." The Buddha himself lived this way for over 40 years after his awakening. He did not disappear into bliss. He walked from village to village. He sat with farmers and kings, with the sick and the healthy, with the confused and the clear. He listened. He taught. He was present. And in every encounter, the vastness of what he had realized poured itself into the intimacy of a single conversation, a single moment, a single person's need. This is what it means to be whole. Not to choose between the vast and the intimate, but to discover that they were never separate, that the sky and the single blade of grass are made of the same light, that the ocean and the smallest wave are the same water. Let us explore another story, shorter this time, and with a different flavor. It carries a small smile inside it, but also something wise. There was once a warrior, a man of great skill and considerable pride, who had spent time studying the teachings of emptiness. He had read the ancient texts. He had sat in meditation. He had worked very hard with his mind, and he believed he had come to understand something profound. One day, he went to visit a meditation teacher. He walked into the room with the particular confidence of someone who believes they have figured something out and would very much like to be congratulated for it. He sat down, folded his arms, and announced, with satisfaction, "I have realized that the whole world is empty. Everything is emptiness. All form is an illusion. Nothing is truly real." He sat back and waited. The teacher regarded him calmly for a moment. Then, very deliberately, the teacher said something quite insulting to him. Something blunt and provocative, aimed directly at the warrior's pride. The effect was immediate. The warrior's face flushed. His hand flew to the hilt of his sword. His jaw tightened. Every muscle in his body coiled, ready to spring. The room, which had been peaceful a moment ago, was suddenly charged with a very different energy. The teacher looked at him and said, very gently, very quietly, "Emptiness is quick to show its temper, is it not?" The warrior froze. His hand slowly released the sword. And something in him, something beneath the pride and the anger and the need to be right, began to soften. Because the teacher was right. If everything were truly empty, if the warrior had truly understood what he claimed to understand, then there would be no one to be insulted, no pride to be wounded, no sword to reach for, no temper to lose. The understanding had been in his head, but not yet in his body, not yet in his heart. It was an idea he had learned, not a truth he had lived. And in one small, surprising, slightly humorous moment, the teacher had shown him the gap between knowing something and being something. This is a teaching that runs very deep, and it is one of the gentlest warnings in the Buddhist tradition. It is possible to understand emptiness with the mind and still be completely disconnected from the heart. It is possible to meditate for years, to have genuine insights, to see clearly that the world is flowing and impermanent and empty of fixed identity, and yet to remain, in the most ordinary human ways, a stranger to your own feelings. The warrior's emptiness was real, as far as it went, but it did not go far enough. It had not yet made the journey from the head to the chest, from understanding to embodiment, from wisdom to love. And this is why that old teacher's words are so important. Wisdom tells me I am nothing. Love tells me I am everything. Because it is not enough to see that you are nothing. That is half the truth. The other half is that you are everything. That this life, with all its specificity, all its tenderness, all its plain and beautiful ordinariness, matters. That the people you love matter. That the tea in the cup matters. That the ache in your back and the sound of rain on the window and the way the light falls across the floor at a certain hour of the afternoon, all of it matters. Because all of it is you. And you are all of it. Let us visit one more scene together. This one is quieter than the others. There was a person who had just come home from a long period of solitary practice. Weeks of silence. Weeks of looking inward. Weeks of listening to the breath and the birds and the rain and the extraordinary quiet that comes when you set down, for a while, all the noise of ordinary life. And during that time, something had opened in them. A wide, soft, spacious feeling of love for all things. A sense of connectedness so vast, it seemed to have no edges, no boundaries, no limits. They felt as though they could love the whole world, every creature, every being, every leaf on every tree. It was a beautiful feeling, genuine and deep and true, the kind of feeling you cannot fake or force, the kind that simply arrives like sunrise when the conditions are right. And then, one evening at home, in the most ordinary setting imaginable, as they were lying quietly and breathing, something unexpected happened. Deep inside, in a place they did not know was there, something stirred. It was as though a second door, hidden behind the first, suddenly swung open, and through it came not more of the same wide, spacious, universal love, but something entirely different. A different warmth. A different color, almost. Where the universal love had been like white light, vast and even, this was deeper, richer, more like the red and gold at the center of a fire. And what came through that door was the most personal love imaginable. They felt, rising up from somewhere very deep, a sudden, overwhelming tenderness for one specific person. Their child. Not all children. This child. The weight of that small body in their arms. The sound of that particular laugh, the one that came out in hiccups when something was really funny. The way the hair fell across the forehead during sleep. And then, close behind, love for their partner, Not love for all beings. Love for this one being. This specific, imperfect, irreplaceable person they had chosen to share a life with. And then the place where they lived. Not the earth. This place. This home. The garden they had planted together in the spring. The way the tomatoes smelled on the vine in late summer, warm and green and alive. The creak of the front step that they kept meaning to fix and never did. It was not a step down from the universal love. It was, if anything, deeper, more textured, more alive, as though the vast sky-like love had finally found a place to land, a specific, humble, earthly place, with dirt under its fingernails and a kitchen that needed cleaning. And in landing there, it became something even more beautiful than it had been in the sky. This is the wedding of everything and nothing. The moment when emptiness and form embrace. When the vastness discovers that it does not need to stay vast to be true. That it can pour itself into a single child, a single garden, a single creaking step, and lose nothing. Gain everything. This is what wholeness really looks like. Not a choice between transcendence and tenderness. Not a decision to be either the sky or the single blade of grass. But the discovery that you are both. That you have always been both. That the nothing and the everything are not opposites standing on either side of a great divide, but lovers who have been reaching for each other all along. The Buddha did not awaken in order to disappear. He awakened in order to return, to walk the dusty roads again, to sit with people in their confusion and their pain and their ordinary luminous lives, to eat the food that was offered to him and sleep beneath the trees that sheltered him and feel the rain on his face and the earth beneath his feet, to be, as Dogen said, intimate with all things. Not intimate with some grand abstract idea of all things, but intimate with this thing, this person, this moment, this breath. And you do not need 1,000 arms to do this. You only need the 2 you have, and a willingness to let them reach toward whatever is in front of you, right now, with kindness. To hold what can be held, to touch what can be touched, to offer what you can, even if what you can offer is simply your attention, simply your presence, simply the quiet acknowledgement that you are here, and so is someone else, and that matters. The emptiness you have been discovering all evening, as we have walked through these teachings together, that open, flowing, spacious quality of things, is not the end of the road. It is not the destination. It is the ground on which love stands. It is the space in which tenderness can finally breathe without being crowded or rushed or squeezed into too small a container. It is the stillness out of which the most ordinary, beautiful, unremarkable act of caring can arise. Holding a door for someone who has their hands full. Listening, really listening, to a friend who needs to talk. Sitting quietly beside someone who is going through a difficult time without trying to fix it, just being there. Watching the evening settle over the place where you live and feeling, quietly, gratefully, that it is good to be here, that this is enough, that this has always been enough. These are not small things. These are the 1,000 arms. These are the boundless compassion, expressed not in cosmic gestures but in the gentle, specific, utterly human act of being present, of showing up, of caring about this one life, this one moment, this one person. Between nothing and everything, your life moves. And it is a good life. And it is enough. Let us pause here. Let the breath settle. And when you are ready, we will continue together. There is a Zen saying that goes like this: before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. It is one of the simplest teachings in all of the tradition, and perhaps the truest. Because what it says, in its quiet way, is that the great realization does not take you somewhere else. It brings you back to where you already are. The same kitchen, the same morning, the same hands doing the same familiar work. But something has changed. Not the world. You. We have walked a long way together this evening, through stories of mountain monasteries and old teachers in small rooms, through rivers that flow by themselves and bells that ring with the whole universe inside them, through the tender territory of old wounds and the startling discovery that love and emptiness are not enemies but partners. And now, as the evening grows late and the body grows heavy, let us come home. Let us explore one more story. This one is about a journey that took not days or weeks, but many, many years. There was once a person who set out on the spiritual path with great enthusiasm. They were young and sharp and eager, and they wanted, more than anything, to understand, to see clearly, to know the truth of things. And so they threw themselves into practice with tremendous energy. They studied. They sat in silence for long stretches. They trained their mind the way an athlete trains a body, with discipline and focus and an iron will. And it worked, in a way. Over the years, their mind became very clear, very powerful. They could concentrate with great precision. They could look at any experience and see it break apart into its smallest pieces, the way light breaks apart when it passes through a prism. They had genuine insights, real moments of seeing through the illusion of solidity, of glimpsing the vast, open, empty nature of things. But after about 10 years of this, they noticed something troubling. When they came back from these deep periods of inner work and returned to ordinary life, to relationships, to conversations, to the messy and beautiful business of being a human being among other human beings, they found that not much had changed. The old patterns were still there, the same reactions, the same difficulties with closeness, the same subtle distance between themselves and the people they cared about. They had trained the mind beautifully, but the heart had been left behind. This is not an uncommon discovery. In fact, it may be one of the most important discoveries a person can make on the spiritual path. That seeing clearly is not the same as living fully. That understanding the nature of things is wonderful, but it is not, by itself, enough. The Buddha spoke of awakening not only as a seeing, but as a developing. He described it as the cultivation of 7 beautiful qualities: awareness, curiosity, energy, joy, calm, focus, and a vast and steady equanimity. Not just one of these, all of them, together, growing over time like the branches of a great tree. Not just the branch of insight, but the branch of compassion, the branch of patience, the branch of joy, the branch of deep, unshakable peace. And so this person, after a decade of training the mind, began a second journey, a journey into the heart. It was humbling work, deeply humbling. After years of developing razor-sharp clarity, after years of being the one who could see through anything, they now had to learn something that felt, at first, embarrassingly simple. How to feel. How to let the chest soften instead of holding it firm. how to let tears come when tears needed to come, without analyzing them or trying to see through them. How to sit with another person and actually be present with them, not just observing them from behind the glass of a well-trained mind, but meeting them, heart to heart, without armor, without the safety of distance. If the first journey had been about seeing, this second one was about being willing to be seen, to be vulnerable, to let the carefully constructed walls of understanding grow thin enough for warmth to pass through. It took years. It was not always comfortable. There were times when the person felt like a beginner again, fumbling with something that other people seemed to do naturally. But slowly, season by season, something began to change. The clarity they had developed did not go away. It simply found a warmer place to live. The seeing and the feeling began to weave together, the way two rivers merge and become something wider and deeper than either one alone. And then, after another long stretch of years, a third realization came. Quieter than the first two, more humble still. They realized that for all their seeing and all their feeling, they had not yet fully arrived in their own body. They had not yet fully come home to the simple, physical fact of being here, on this earth, in this form, with these hands and these feet and this weight pressing gently against the ground. They could observe the body beautifully. They could place their attention anywhere, in a hand, in a foot, in the rhythm of the breath, with great skill. But there is a difference between observing something and inhabiting it, between watching a house from the outside and actually living in it, hanging your coat by the door, knowing which floorboard creaks, feeling the warmth of it around you like a second skin. And so a third journey began. Not to see, not to feel, but simply to be, to inhabit this life, this body, this moment, all the way. Not as a visitor, but as someone who has finally come home and decided to stay. This story is not about one person, really. It is about all of us. Because these three movements, seeing, feeling, and being, are not stages that you complete and leave behind, like grades in a school. They are more like dimensions of a single, ongoing homecoming. And they do not always happen in order. Sometimes the heart opens first. Sometimes the body leads the way. Sometimes a moment of clear seeing comes before anything else, and the feeling and the embodying catch up later. The important thing is not the order. The important thing is the direction. And the direction is always the same. Closer, more intimate, more fully here. The great teacher Dogen called this being intimate with all things. And by all things, he did not mean only the grand and the beautiful. He meant the ache in the knee, the taste of plain rice, the sound of rain on a roof you have heard 1,000 times, the face of someone you see every day, looked at, really looked at, as though for the first time. Intimacy with all things, including this body, which has carried you so faithfully for so long, through every season, every joy, every difficulty, without once asking for your gratitude. Including this heart, which has felt so much and is still willing to feel more, still willing to be moved, still willing to open, even after all the times it has been asked to close. Including this mind, which has worked so hard to understand and protect and plan, and which can now, perhaps, begin to rest, to set down its tools, to stop solving and simply be, This is what coming home means. Not going somewhere new, but arriving, at last, in the place you have always been, and discovering that it is good, that it was always good, that the home you were searching for was not at the end of some long road, but right here, under your feet, inside your chest, as close as the next breath. And here, near the end of our evening together, is the gentlest teaching of all, the one that the ancient teachers seem to save for last, not because it was the least important, but because it is the hardest to believe. You do not have to do this perfectly. You do not need to rush. You do not need to follow a program or hit a milestone or become a certain kind of person by a certain date. You do not need to figure out whether you are on the path of the mind or the path of the heart or the path of the body. You do not need to compare your journey to anyone else's. You do not need to figure out anything at all. Because the truth is, and this is the part that is so hard to believe but so important to hear, something in you already knows how to do this. The same intelligence that breathes your breath and beats your heart and heals a cut while you sleep, the same intelligence that knew how to grow you from a single tiny cell into the extraordinary being you are right now, that same intelligence knows how to open you. It knows what needs to soften and when. It knows what needs to surface and in what order. It knows which door to open next and when you are ready to walk through it. It knows the pace, the rhythm, the timing, better than your planning mind ever could. All you need to do is keep showing up. Keep returning to the present moment, again and again, the way a bird returns to its branch after each flight. Not with grim determination, not with effort or strain, but with the simple, gentle willingness to be here, to be available, to say, quietly, to this moment, I am here. Show me what you have. What needs to open in you will open. What needs to heal will heal. What needs to be felt will make itself felt, gently, in its own time. What needs to be released will find its own way out, the way water finds its way downhill, not because someone told it to, but because that is its nature. Because flowing toward freedom is what life does. You can trust this. You can rest in this. The way you rest in the knowledge that spring will come after winter, not because you made it happen, but because that is how things are. Because something immense and patient and kind is holding this whole process, and it has not once, in all the long ages of the world, forgotten what it is doing. The Buddha was once asked by a student, "What is the essence of your teaching?" And the Buddha replied, "Nothing whatsoever should be clung to. Nothing whatsoever. Not your insights. Not your wounds. Not your ideas about who you are or who you should become. Not even these words you are hearing right now. Let it all be held loosely, the way you hold water in an open palm. Present, but not grasped. Here, but free to go. And in that open holding, in that tender, ungraspable aliveness, something becomes possible that was not possible before. A kind of ease that has no opposite. A kind of peace that does not depend on things going a certain way. A kind of wholeness that includes everything, the seeing and the feeling and the being, the mind and the heart and the body, the vast and the intimate, the nothing and the everything. This is your birthright, not something you earn, something you already are. You are here. You are not here in order to not be here. And so you might as well enter this dance, fully, gently, with the kindness and curiosity and courage that have brought you this far. The wood still needs chopping. The water still needs carrying. But now, perhaps, you do it with a lighter step and a wider smile and the quiet, unshakable sense that you are home. You have always been home. Let us rest here. Let everything settle like snow falling on still water. And when you are ready, we will close together. A student once asked an old Zen master, "What is the highest teaching?" The master said, "Have you eaten your breakfast?" "Yes," the student replied. "Then wash your bowl." That was the whole teaching. The student bowed and left. And something in that small exchange, something in the plainness of it, changed everything for him. Not because the words were clever, but because they pointed, with perfect simplicity, to something he had been walking past his whole life without seeing. The sacred is not somewhere else. It is here, in the bowl, in the washing, in the warm water on your hands. We have spent this evening exploring vast and beautiful ideas, the expansiveness of our true nature, the seeds of awakening that grow on their own, the paradox of self and no self, the river of life that flows without a manager, the tender work of meeting our own wounds with kindness, the wedding of emptiness and love, the long homecoming to this body, this heart, this life. And all of that is true. All of it matters. But there is one more thing worth saying before the evening ends. And it may be the simplest thing of all. The place where all of these teachings come alive is not on a mountaintop. It is not in a monastery. It is not in some extraordinary state of mind that you achieve after years of effort. It is in the ordinary, in the plain, unremarkable, easily overlooked moments that make up the great majority of a human life. The cup of water you drink before bed, the pillow you adjust beneath your head, the sound of the house settling around you, the warmth of a blanket pulled up to your chin. These are not interruptions to the spiritual life. They are the spiritual life. There is a story about a traveler who went looking for a great teacher. He had heard that this teacher lived alone in the mountains and that his wisdom was beyond anything the traveler had ever encountered. And so the traveler made the long journey, climbing higher and higher, until at last he found a small hut near the top of a ridge, with smoke rising from a chimney. He knocked on the door. An old man opened it. He was wearing simple clothes, nothing that marked him as anything special. His hands were damp, and the traveler could see behind him a small kitchen with a pot on the fire and vegetables laid out on a cutting board. "Are you the teacher?" the traveler asked. "Come in," the old man said. "I am just making soup." The traveler came in and sat down. He waited for the teaching to begin. He waited for the old man to sit across from him and speak profound words about the nature of reality, to guide him in meditation, to transmit some secret that would transform his understanding. But the old man just made soup. He chopped the vegetables slowly with care. Each cut was deliberate, unhurried. The sound of the knife on the wooden board had a kind of rhythm to it, steady and calm, like a heartbeat. He added the vegetables to the pot one handful at a time and stirred with a long wooden spoon that had been smoothed by years of use. He added a pinch of salt, lifted the spoon to his lips, tasted, considered, and added a little more. Steam rose from the pot and curled in the lamplight. He moved around his small kitchen the way water moves in a stream, unhurried, fluid, completely at ease. Every gesture was simple and precise. Nothing wasted, nothing rushed, nothing done for show. It was as though the act of making soup was the most important thing in the world. Not because it was soup, but because it was what was happening. And he was completely, entirely there for it. The traveler watched, growing restless. He shifted on his seat. He looked around the hut for scrolls, for texts, for some sign of spiritual authority. He found none. Just a clean room, a warm fire, a pot of soup, and an old man who seemed perfectly content to stir. "Teacher," the traveler said at last, unable to contain himself any longer, "I have come a very long way. Over mountains, through rain. I have not slept well in days. When will you give me the teaching?" The old man looked up from his stirring and smiled. It was a gentle smile, without a trace of mockery. The kind of smile you might give a child who has been searching the whole house for a pair of glasses that are already sitting on their nose. "I have been giving it to you since you walked in the door," he said. And then he ladled the soup into 2 bowls, set one in front of the traveler, and sat down across from him. They ate together in silence, and the soup was very good. This is perhaps the most radical idea in all of Zen, that the highest spiritual attainment is not some blinding flash of insight or some otherworldly experience, but the ability to be fully present with whatever is right in front of you, to chop when you chop, to stir when you stir, to wash the bowl when the bowl needs washing, not because these actions are special, but because you bring the whole of yourself to them. Because in that moment, there is no separation between you and the act. No part of your mind wandering to tomorrow's problems. No part of your heart wishing you were somewhere else. Just this. Completely. The great teacher Thich Nhat Hanh called this washing the dishes to wash the dishes. Not washing the dishes to get them done. Not washing the dishes while planning dinner or replaying a conversation or worrying about next week. But being there with the warm water and the smooth surface of the plate and the gentle sound of it all, as though this were the only moment that had ever existed. Because in a sense, it is. There is a tremendous freedom in this. Because it means that no moment of your life is wasted. No moment is too small or too plain to hold the whole of what you are. The breath you are taking right now is as sacred as any breath ever taken by any monk on any mountaintop in the history of the world. Not because this moment is extraordinary, but because you are here for it. And being here, fully here, is the extraordinary thing. The Buddha, toward the end of his life, gave a teaching that has been passed down through the centuries as one of his most important. He said, "Be a lamp unto yourself." Not be a lamp unto some future, better version of yourself. Not be a lamp unto the self you will become after you have practiced long enough, or read enough books, or sat in enough silence. But be a lamp unto yourself, right now, as you are, with whatever light you have, however dim you think that light might be. This is not a call to self-improvement. It is an invitation to self-trust. To trust that the awareness you have right now, this gentle, ordinary awareness that notices the breath and feels the weight of the body and hears the quiet sounds of the night, is enough, is complete, is whole, is the very lamp the Buddha was talking about. You do not need a brighter lamp. You do not need someone else's lamp. You do not need to wait until you have read all the right books, or had all the right experiences, or become the kind of person you think you ought to be. You only need to stop looking elsewhere and notice that your lamp is already lit. It has been lit all along, shining quietly in every moment you have ever lived. Every time you pause today and notice something, the color of the sky, the feeling of your feet on the ground, the warmth of another person's voice, the taste of something simple that you ate, that was the lamp, shining quietly, without fanfare, without needing anyone to tell it that it was enough. There is something deeply restful about this teaching, because it means the journey is not really a journey at all. It is more like what happens when you stop traveling and look around and realize you have been standing in the garden the whole time. The flowers were always here. The birdsong was always here. The evening light was always falling just like this, gentle and golden and unhurried. You were simply moving too fast to notice. And now you have slowed down. And now you are here. And now, perhaps, you can feel what was always waiting to be felt. The simple goodness of being alive. The quiet miracle of a body that breathes, and a heart that beats, and a mind that can wonder at the strangeness and beauty of it all. In the old Zen monasteries, the daily schedule was not filled with hours of exotic practices or elaborate rituals. It was filled with ordinary things. Cooking, cleaning, walking from one room to another, sitting quietly, eating a simple meal, sweeping a path that would only need sweeping again tomorrow. And each of these was treated as practice, not as a break from practice, not as the boring part you had to get through before the real spiritual work began, but as the practice itself. Each ordinary act was an opportunity to be fully present. Each one was sacred, not because a priest had blessed it or a scripture had declared it so, but because someone was paying attention. Because someone was there, completely there, for the washing, for the sweeping, for the cup of tea held in two hands. A monk once asked his teacher, "What is the meaning of the ancestors coming from the West?" Which was a traditional way of asking, what is the deepest truth of this tradition? The teacher replied, the cypress tree in the garden. Not a philosophy, not a doctrine, a tree, right there, in front of you. That is the deepest truth. The living, breathing, ordinary world met with full attention. This is available to you, not someday, not after you have improved enough or understood enough or become calm enough. Now, in whatever small, plain, ordinary moment you find yourself in next. The spiritual life does not ask you to leave your life behind. It asks you to enter it, all the way, with both feet, with your whole heart, with a kind of gentle attention that makes even the most familiar thing shimmer with newness. And so, as this evening draws to its close, and the body settles deeper into rest, and the thoughts begin to soften like embers in a fire that has burned long and well, consider this. Tomorrow, you will wake up. You will open your eyes. You will feel the first moment of the new day arrive, the way it always does, quietly, without ceremony, as ordinary as anything in the world. Light coming through a window, the feeling of sheets against skin, the slow return of the mind from wherever it has been. And in that moment, before the thinking starts, before the planning begins, before the familiar list of things to do assembles itself in your mind, Before the day takes shape around you like water filling a glass, there will be a small, quiet space. A breath, a pause, a flicker of awareness, brief and bright, in which you are simply here. Not doing, not deciding, not becoming, just being, just awake, just arrived in another morning, fresh and new, like every morning that has ever been. That is the teaching, that small moment, that tiny, easily missed, infinitely precious pause between sleep and waking, between silence and sound, between nothing and everything. The whole of what we have explored tonight lives in that pause. All the vastness and all the tenderness, all the emptiness and all the love. The bowl has been washed. The soup has been made. The old teacher is smiling in his kitchen. The stars are turning slowly overhead, as they have been turning since long before anyone was here to watch them. And somewhere, in a monastery tucked into a green hillside, a monk is expanding beyond the walls, touching the stars, vast and free and unafraid. And you are here. You are part of it all. You always were. You always will be. An old poet wrote, "The morning glory which blooms for an hour differs not at heart from the giant pine which lives for 1,000 years." Your life, however quiet, however ordinary, however small it may sometimes seem to you, is as whole and as complete as any life that has ever been lived. It lacks nothing. It needs nothing added. It is already, in this very moment, exactly what it is supposed to be. You are whole, and the ordinary life you are living, this night, this breath, this body resting where it rests, is the beautiful, undeniable proof. Let us pause here, one last time. Feel the breath, soft and easy. And when you are ready, we will close together. And so we come to rest. Tonight we have traveled a long and gentle road together. We have visited monasteries on hillsides and small rooms above busy streets. We have sat with teachers who laughed and warriors who reached for their swords, and travelers who searched the whole world for a jewel they were already carrying. We have listened to bells ring and rivers flow and birds sing before the dawn. And through it all, one thread has been woven quietly, steadily, like a golden thread through cloth. The thread of wholeness, the recognition that you are not broken, that you were never broken, that the vast, open, sky-like nature the ancient teachers spoke of is not something you need to earn or achieve or become. It is what you already are. It is what you have always been. The seeds are planted